Our last speaker before lunch is Peter Harrell, Chief Executive Officer of Poseidon Nickel.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, so the Poseidon story, not to be confused with the film about the boat. This is a much more exciting story, and we're certainly on land. So look, we're a story that's been around for a long time, and funnily enough, I worked with Panoramic for 18 years, and that was a very successful business, and the assets that are in Poseidon were a successful business as well. A lot of people in the room's parents or grandparents probably made or lost money out of the Windarra asset, which we now own, and also the ex-MPI asset, which I worked on in 1995, which is Black Swan, which is hopefully our first restart, and then also the Lake Johnson asset, which is part of the old Lion Ore Norilsk asset. So look, excuse me, all these three assets were picked up by the previous management very cheaply, and we've obviously then looked at developing those, and a couple of times they've had a few false starts, almost always, or pretty well always, because of the nickel price. And you know, nickel has been very volatile. Certainly I've been in nickel for the last 30 years, and I've seen the nickel price as low as $1.87 a pound when we actually sold our interest in Silver Swan because we couldn't make any money out of a 14% ore body underground, up to as high as $20 a pound when I was running Panoramic, and they were the glory days. We had Frankie, which I notice today has just been dealt. Black Mountain have sold 50% of that or dealt 50% of that to Tembo, so it's good to see that asset moving along. That was an asset that we sold out or developed and then sold in Panoramic a few years ago. So it's good to see those assets going through another cycle. And that's what we've got here. We've got assets going through another cycle. And everyone else has been talking about it since the start of this morning. Certainly the lady from Wood Mackenzie talks about what nickel looks like going forward. And clearly, if we're talking about north of $9, $10 a pound for the next 20 or 30 years and higher prices than that, then all of these assets we've got here will be mines again. So 400,000 tonnes of nickel in resource, a couple of processing plants that are in very good condition considering they've been shut for the best part of 5 to 10 years. We've got the stake knives. You've always got to have a little bit extra, and we've got 180,000 ounces of gold in tailings, which we look to bring into production as well, probably with a partner. And we are looking at being in production next year, late next year, so not far behind Mincor and Panoramic. And we've got some high-grade discoveries as well, which we've been focusing on too. So lots of low-grade nickel, medium-grade nickel, and some high-grade nickel as well. The current structure, we've got about 3 billion shares on issue, and that's because we've been around for a long time. Share price today was around about 9 cents. That's a market cap of just under $300 million. And as at last count, we had just under $30 million in the bank. We did an equity raising a couple of months ago. We went out to raise 20. We had massive interest in the book. It was closed within 2 hours with a lot more than $20 million in the book. We went out to do an SPP to support our existing shareholders. We were chasing $3 million and got $13 million into the book. So we scaled that up to about $6 million, and that was all done just in the last month or so. Existing shareholders, Black Mountain and Wyloo, which is the forest interest, both around about 12%. And then really just high net worth individuals. We have had some new investors come on stream recently, some institutions. So Morgan's with the last raising and the raising before that helped to bring some institutional investors onto the register. But there are a lot of high net worth individuals, mostly on the East Coast, and then some retail investors as well, making up the balance. We've got a good board. Obviously, Derek Lafurle is well known to everyone, just gone onto the board of Chalice, also the director, or as chairman, or will be when Tim steps down. Also chairman of Sandfire as well, so well known in the base metal industry in Australia. Myself, Dean, representing Black Mountain, Felicity representing Wyloo. Peter Michelli came on board just after I joined. I wanted to have a geologist on the board, and I'm a process engineer, so it made sense to beef up the board with Peter. He's been fantastic. He's the most excitable bloke I've ever met, and it's really, really hard to just keep him sort of without jumping out of his skin. He's incredible. He gets very excited when you start putting up geological plans and sections. And then Brendan Shalders, who joined just before I did, well experienced in base metals. So we're all here today talking about electric vehicles, but there's also a lot of nickel being used in stainless steel. When I started in nickel 30 years ago, there was about 1 million tonnes of primary nickel consumed, and 70% of that went into making stainless steel. Today, there is about 2.5 million tonnes of nickel being consumed, and 70% of that goes into making stainless steel. So even though we're talking about motor cars, stainless steel has been growing compound since 1970, and there's no reason why it won't continue to do that. So, stainless steel will still underpin, but there's this enormous growth coming in electric vehicles. And I think everyone's pretty much used this slide or a derivation of it, but currently 2.5 million tonnes by 2050. We're talking about nearly 9 to 10 million tonnes of nickel. So it's nearly a 4 times increase. It's the biggest increase of all of those commodities in terms of demand. And I think everyone's sort of not sure where the nickel's going to come from. Again, when I started in nickel 30 years ago, there was all these projects that were out in the coming on stream sometime in the next 10 to 20 years. There was, Goro, Pomela, Ramu, all those things that were out in the ether. Every one of those projects has been developed or is in the process of being developed. So there's none of these new projects that was talked about for years. So it is a bit sort of concerning to the market, a bit to where all that nickel's coming from. As John, most of the other people talked about, it's going to come from exploration. All this M&A activity that's going on is going to keep going on. It doesn't produce any new nickel. It just changes the, just moves around the seats. But fundamentally, we need that exploration, and that's what we're going to be doing. As a combination of bringing these projects on stream, we're also going to explore as well. So our 3 assets are all in Western Australia. Black Swan, that's the project that I was involved in building. You can't even see the little concentrator that we built. It's 150,000 tonnes. It's tucked in behind the big SAG and ball mill there. That plant was upgraded to 600,000 tonnes by Lion Ore, and then to 2 million tonnes by Norilsk back in 2008 or 9, I think, when the nickel price was $20 a pound. We're looking at restarting that at about 1 million tonne a year. And GRs have been doing a lot of work on that for us and are about to start a full feasibility study once we just finish some metallurgical work. So the plant produced, or Silver Swan itself produced about 140,000 tonnes of nickel at about 5% from the underground ore body that we discovered back in 1995. And then they obviously started mining the low-grade open pit disseminated material and pulled about 40,000 tonnes out of there. So about 180,000 tonnes of nickel out of this mineralised system from about 1997 to about 2010. And nearly, as I said, 180,000 tonnes of nickel in concentrate. We've got still about 16,000 tonnes of nickel in Silver Swan. We hope to have a resource out in the next couple of weeks on Golden Swan, the new discovery, and that'll add to that high-grade resource base. 9.5% is the average grade of Silver Swan. There's some tailings, which we're going to retreat as well, that runs, it's got about 6,000 tonnes of nickel in it. That's important to keep the iron-MgO ratio right for the concentrate. And then there's some stockpile material. But the main tonnage is in the open pit. There's about 180,000 tonnes of nickel, averaging about 0.7. So the focus, as I said, is restarting the mill. The name of the presentation is Fill the Mill. We looked around at just going with a high grade at 150,000 tonnes, and the thing that really decided us to switch our focus a couple of weeks ago to go to the high grade, to go to the larger volumes, is basically the nickel price forecast. If we thought nickel was going back to $6 again, then it wouldn't make any sense to turn the big mill on. You'd just focus on the high grade, low volume, higher margin business. But because the nickel price outlook is so good based on those supply demand figures, it makes so much more sense to mine, as Norilsk did back when nickel was $20 a pound, go for the jugular, turn the big one on, fill it up, and make a lot of money out of doing that, especially with nickel at sort of potentially north of $9 a pound. So that's what we're looking at doing. And obviously, as other people have mentioned, nickel payabilities have improved. When I was involved in the Silver Swan project, I actually negotiated the contract back in 1996 with Outokumpu, who were the other 50% owners of Silver Swan back in those days. And nickel payabilities were about 55 to 60%. And then they went to sort of 65%, and now the numbers are sort of north of 75%, up into the 80s. So you can see where the world's changed. Not only has nickel price gone up, but also the payabilities have gone up. And if you believe old Scotty, he's going to be paying maybe even 90%. Crikey, I better have a chat to him. So I've got his mobile number. I'll give him a call after this. That's pretty exciting. Look, this is a bit of history, but in the middle of that slide is David Burt, who turned 80 this year. David was the guy that was instrumental in the discovery of the Silver Swan ore body. So David pegged the ground. We did the deal with the 4 joint venture partners who were exploring for diamonds at the time and had sort of gone a bit quiet. The guys from DDH1 in their previous life, Murray and Co. went out there. I think they took all the stickers off the side of the car so no one knew who they were. It was a private company and we were out there drilling for 6 months. The first drill hole hit mineralisation below where Anglo were drilled in the 70s. And within 6 months, we drilled out a 440,000 tonne resource at 14%. So we actually used to mine it at about 8% and then put it back through the concentrator and take it back to 20%. 60,000 tonnes of nickel discovered in 6 months. From effectively a drill hole that hadn't been continued back in 1997. So you can see there's the open pit in the middle. Silver Swan started at about 200 metres below surface. We had that 60,000 tonnes down to about 500 below surface, and you can see Udukumpu and then Lion Ore and then Norilsk went all the way down to about 1.3 kilometres below surface to find that 130,000 tonnes and mine that I talked about. Down the bottom there, you can see the purple. That's that 16,000 tonnes that I talked about. And then over about 300 to 400 metres to the north, you've got the Golden Swan discovery, which I can't take any credit for. I think I arrived about 2 days before we hit the first drill hole there. So some good high-grade intersections, sort of 6 to 8 metres of around 10% material, which really got us excited. Below the bottom, or underneath Gosling, which was about 5,000 tonnes, we can see that red area there that was mined out below the open pit. So a whole new mineralised system that was sort of uncovered last year. COVID slowed us down a bit, but then we've drilled some holes just recently, and we're in the process now of putting out a maiden resource for Golden Swan in the next couple of weeks. So we drill about 15,000 metres of drilling to get to that maiden resource. And then obviously we'll give that to the mining engineers and convert that to a reserve, hopefully very quickly. And then we'll put that into the plan with the disseminated open pit material, the tailings and Silver Swan and Golden Swan. And that'll form the basis of the material that goes into the 1.1 million tonne mill, which we hope to be commissioning around about December of next year. We've also done some additional drilling on what we call the Southern Terrace, which is the area initially between Gosling and above Golden Swan. And we've got some EM information to release to the market pretty soon. And obviously we'll keep drilling both there and at Silver Swan as well. We've got 2 rigs going at Silver Swan at the moment, so we're doing a combination of increasing the reserve. So currently it's 16,000 tonnes in the resource and only about 6,000 tonnes in the reserve. We want to increase that, so obviously working on that. We also want to test some of the targets that had been left by the previous owners. So as I said, we've got 2 rigs drilling off the decline, a dedicated drill drive, looking to increase that resource and also increase the reserve as well. So the Big Mill Initiative, GRs, and I see Tony in the room, so acknowledging Tony and the great work that the guys have done and girls have done at GRs. Fantastic to see a processing plant that's been sitting idle for over 10 years and is only going to cost us just over $20 million to refurb. I'm sure that price will go up a little bit because obviously it's pretty hot in the sector at the moment, but it's not going to double. So even if it went up 20 or 30%, which is probably some sort of indication of where it might be, we're still talking less than $30 million to do a refurb. I would think a replacement of a plant like that today, you wouldn't get much change out of $150 to $200 million, and it would take you a long time in this in climate to build it and operate it and get it commissioned. OPEX around about 29. It looks like we'll be able to connect to the grid. Western Power believe there's enough capacity there, so that'll be fantastic. That'll obviously keep our power costs down, so we won't have to rely on diesel. And as I've mentioned before, there's a number of different ore sources there. Interestingly, I've also put up there Windarra, where we're hoping that we'll be able to fire up an underground mine there and bring ore down in the future to supplement the higher grade material we've got at Black Swan. And there's also the potential for third-party feeds. There's a number of smaller ore bodies that were discovered by previous and existing people in the vicinity of Black Swan, and hopefully we can have further dialogue with those people people. We know who they are, and hopefully if they want to joint venture with us or sell ore to us, we'd be happy to accommodate them. So the timetable, it's a busy slide, but really focused on getting a sort of a preliminary scoping study out on the big mill by the end of the year, announce that to the market, and then obviously into next year finalise the feasibility study work and be in a position to really by sort of late April, early May, commit to the development of the project. Assuming that sort of 6-month ramp up, we could be putting ore through the concentrator in December of next year. So pretty exciting time for us. A lot of work to do, but it's very, very doable. And I've got 5 minutes to talk about the other two things in our business, which is Lake Johnson, probably an asset that's been sort of forgotten about by the markets a little bit. Not judging by the number of people that have been trying to buy it off us, but we're certainly interested in hanging on to that asset. So look, Emily Ann, 1.5 million tonnes at 3.5% mined by line ore, and then Maggie Hayes, 10 million tonnes at 0.6. So people forget nearly 100,000 tonnes of nickel came out of this project in the last few years. It was shut down about 2014. It was bought by us in about 2016, and they almost restarted it, and then the nickel price collapsed again. So, which was unfortunate, but right decision because nickel was bouncing around. Again, this project or this plant is well built, and again, we're going to get GRs to give us a hand to have a look at what's going to cost us to restart that. There's been a number of studies done before by different engineering firms, all good work, and I'm sure that again, the numbers here we're talking about are very low to get this project restarted. The other thing that's got us really excited here is the work that was done by New Exco recently. They've done a fantastic job in pulling all the data together, deciphering it all and working out what all the targets are. And there are a lot of untested exploration targets that's got us really excited. We've had some great work done at Golden Swan by Webdrill, and I acknowledge the Webdrill guys here today. They've done a great job since they started back there in March of last year, and I'm sure that we'll be looking at bringing them down there to Lake Johnson to do some drilling, hopefully sooner rather than later. There is potential for some more komatiite style deposits, but there's also this intrusive model that Steve Warriner developed up. There's sort of 16 kilometres of strike there you can see. There's Emily Ann, which is the 3.5% ore body. A bit further south, you've got Maggie Hayes, which is 1.5%. Emily Ann, which was not Emily Ann, Abbey Rose was a discovery by Steve Warriner when he was working for us, named after his wife, I think, and sort of 10 metres of over 3% nickel. Really haven't had a chance to follow that up because they just didn't have the funding. So we'll go back and have another look at that. A lot of excitement there, and we're pretty excited about the potential. Windarra, that's a photograph of the old mill. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. It was pulled down and the site was rehabilitated. But we're talking about taking ore from there and potentially trucking it down to Black Swan or potentially selling it to BHP at Leinster. There's around about 150,000 tonnes of nickel, both in Mount Windarra, the ore body there, and also at Cerberus. And there's the gold tailings project that I talked about as well, which we did a feasibility study and released that in July. And we're currently talking to a couple of groups about potentially partnering up. It's not an asset that we'll do on our own, but in partnership with somebody else, we'd really like to monetise that. It's pretty much ready to go. We're just waiting for the state government to terminate the state agreement, and then we can operate under the existing Mining Act, and they've already had 2 readings in Parliament of that termination, so it's not far away at all. What we're then looking at doing is redoing the mining studies and looking at when we could get that underground mine going and how quickly we could either bring it down to Black Swan or sell it to somebody else. So the future is all about getting Black Swan started, and then potentially bringing Lake Johnson and Windarra in as well. So first thing's to get the maiden resource out for Golden Swan, and that's a few weeks away, hopefully, or maybe even next week. Convert more of that Silver Swan resource to reserve to build up that high-grade underground ore sources. Continue drilling the Southern Terrace. Complete the BFS work on the 1.1 million tonne plant, and then get that FID by April, May of next year so that we can be commissioning by December of next year. Windarra, dust off those studies and redo them at the sort of 2022 OPEX and CAPEX numbers, and see whether that's going to be better to sell that to somebody or put it through. It's about the same distance to either truck it down to Black Swan or send it to Leinster. if BHP wanted it, and then obviously fast-track that gold tailings project, which could generate quite a bit of free cash. And then Lake Johnson, we've done the review. Now it's about gearing up, and what we are doing at the moment is hiring people, like probably everybody else in this room. So if you're a geologist or a mining engineer and you want to move, then please come and talk to me. I'm in the booth all afternoon and I can sign you up today if you like. But poor old Andy at the back there is doing a fantastic job, but he's doing it pretty much on his own. He's got Hixie giving him a bit of a hand, but Hixie's sort of supposed to be retired, so Andy needs a hand. So geologists, mining engineers, come and talk to me or Andy, and we can sign you up this afternoon. That means we have to bypass you, Rolly, sorry, but so you won't get a spotter's fee. But I'm sure there's plenty of work to go around. Exciting times for us, and I can't wait to turn another mine on. So looking forward to that. Thank you very much.